Welcome everyone. Hi Saskia, hi Betsy, Sarah, so nice to see you all. Let's wait one more minute for everybody to tune in and then we'll start. Okay. Hi Beth from South Florida. Where's everybody from? I'm in the Netherlands and I'm curious where you are from. Hi, Madison is also here. Madison is our moderator today and she will reply to your questions if I'm not able to answer them. She will help you out. Chicago, Houston, UK. Hi everybody. Good to see you. Norway. Wow. The Netherlands, the UK, Sweden, Arizona. Wow. Costa Rica. Also Netherlands. Very international. Hi everyone. Okay. So today I'm going to do a Facebook Live about alcohol inks on the gel plate. And maybe some of you know that I did a challenge this month on Instagram called Gel Inktober, which is my twist on Inktober, and I challenged myself to create something on the gel plate every day using ink. And I've been experimenting a lot with alcohol ink, which was pretty new to me on the gel plate. I had used it before, but not a lot. So I've been trying all kinds of things, and I discovered that alcohol ink is a really cool product to use on the gel plate. So today I'm going to share with you everything I discovered this month, and I hope you will be just as excited about it as I am. So before I start, I have a couple of things that I have to tell you about the alcohol inks. First, some people really can't stand the smell, and it is very strong, and you need to have your room really well ventilated when you use it. And if you would use a heat gun to dry your prints, for instance, then you should actually wear a mask. But I'm not using a heat gun, so I'm not using a mask. The inks stain your skin, so if you don't want your hands to get dirty, you could wear gloves. I don't do that. First of all, I'm not really that concerned when my hands are not clean. But I also really don't like to wear gloves because I can't really feel what I'm doing. I need to be in touch with the paper and the products that I'm using. Then not only does the ink stain your skin, it also can stain your gel plate. So after my first couple of experiments, people asked me, does it stain your gel plate? And I said no, because it didn't happen. But then I used yellow, sunshine yellow to be precise, and probably there will be more colors, but this is the one that was my how do you say it? I don't know how to say it in English, but was the one that stained my plate. So here you see my stained gel plate, on which I used the sunshine yellow, and this is the gel plate as it is supposed to look. So do I care that my gel plate is yellow. No, I don't, because my gel plate is my tool, and for me it's more important how my prints look than how my gel plate looks, and the stains will not affect future prints. It will not damage your gel plate, so for me it's totally fine that my gel plate is yellow. But if you don't want your gel plate to turn yellow, then maybe you should not use alcohol inks, or at least not the yellow one. So that is the warnings part, and now I'm going to show you a couple of different techniques using the alcohol ink. So now I'm going to turn the camera on my workspace. So I'm going to use this one, and I'm going to start with the easiest technique, and that is to just add alcohol ink to the plate and then stamp on top of it. So I'm using a little brayer, and I'm going to apply the alcohol ink straight to the plate. And I'm just randomly adding the color, and I'm going to add a couple of different colors. Maybe 3. Let's do one more, a bluish one, a little bit. And then I'm going to move the alcohol ink around, but I'm not like completely brayering all over the gel plate, because then I would just end up with a mix of these 3 colors, and there would be no difference in it anywhere. So I'll just move it around a little bit, and maybe I'll add just a little bit more to make the colors a bit brighter. As you can see, when you add a new color to the plate, the previous color is kind of pushed away. So if I would not do anything now, then in my print you would really see these like circles. So if I don't want these circles, I need to kind of move it around a little bit and make the colors blend. So if I want to stamp on top of this, I'm going to use stazon ink, because that is also alcohol based or solvent based. I think it's actually it's solvent ink. But what happens when you add alcohol ink to the stazon ink, it will move, it will reactivate. So I cannot stamp on top of this until this is dry. Because if I would stamp on top of this now and I would remove my stamp, the stazon ink would just float all over the plate. So this needs to dry, and it takes a little while. I can show you. You can see that it's still kind of wet. So I have to put it aside and have it dry for a little while, but I don't want you to wait for it. So this afternoon I did some preparing, and this is one that is already dry, so I can stamp on top. And now I can do 2 things. I can add color, or I can remove color, and I'm going to do both on this one plate, on each half, so you can see the difference. And I'm going to take a printing plate, and on one half I'm going to add the stazon. And you have to make sure that your stazon is nice and juicy, that there is a lot of ink on your stamp, because if the plate is dry, the stamp or the printing plate is dry, it will just lift up the alcohol ink from the gel plate instead of leaving the stazon on the plate. So on this side I'm doing the alcohol lifting ink, alcohol lift ink, and on the other half I did use the stazon. And now I'm going to stamp on my gel plate. Push a little bit. So I'm not sure how much you can see of it, but it should have lifted here a little bit here from the ink, and you will probably see it better in the final print. And on this side you can see that the stazon was added to the gel plate. Now this also needs to be dry before I can add acrylic paint to pull the print, but this dries quite quickly. So let me see in the light if it's dry enough. When you watch my videos on Instagram, you usually see me adding acrylic paint straight to the plate and then brayer the paint on top of the ink. It's better actually to put the ink on the brayer before you touch the gel plate with the brayer, because when you touch the ink with the dry brayer, you will just lift up the ink. So the brayer needs to be wet with paint all around to not lift up the ink from the gel plate. Does that make sense? So when you add the paint on the brayer all around before you touch the gel plate, then you don't have the risk that you lift up the ink. So I'm just going to add a very thin layer of acrylic paint. Place my paper on top. And then lift it up. There you go. So here's my print. And here you can see that the alcohol lift ink actually removed ink from the plate, and that the side with the stazon actually added ink to the plate. So this is, of course, you could do this afterwards. You could pull the print from your plate and then stamp on it afterwards, and you would get kind of the same effect. Why would you do it like this? Well, I'm going to show you with the one that I actually left to dry, that I just prepared. Because now, again, I'm going to stamp on top of this plate, because this should be dry by now. And then we're going to take it one step further. Because, like I said, when you add alcohol ink to the stazon ink, the stazon ink will move around. It will reactivate and it will start floating over your gel plate. So what you can actually do now is to create a texture to kind of remove little bits of the stazon, of the stamped print. But it's very random. It's not like you can precisely choose where you want to remove some of the ink. It's just unpredictable how it will look, but it's fun because it's just fun. So I'm just going to add some drops, if anything is okay, yeah. Add some drops of alcohol ink on top of this, on top of the stamped image. And as you can see, the alcohol ink is kind of pushing away the ink that is already there. And not only the alcohol ink, but it's also doing that with the stazon. Here you can see it better. So you get little bits of color, of a different color, that is kind of removing parts of the stamped image, which is very random, but fun. And you get more texture in your print. So this again has to dry before I can add the acrylic paint to pull the print. So I'm going to put this aside and show you a different technique first, and then I will come back to this one and pull it so you can see the result. So this is going to the side, and then I'm going back to this one that I already pulled. So you can see there's a little bit of ink left. Actually, if I had used exactly enough paint to pull the print, my plate would have been completely clean. So it can be that it stains the plate, but the ink itself should actually be removed from the plate. So if there's any ink left, you can just remove it with a baby wipe. But if you don't care about a different color in your next print, then you can also just leave it on. It will just reactivate with the new ink and might actually add some nice interest. But that's up to you. So now I want to do a technique where I use stencils, but before I do that, let me just very quickly have a look if there are any questions. Does alcohol inks dry faster than non-alcohol inks? Yes, absolutely. There are a lot of inks, even dye inks, that are fast drying normally on paper, will not dry at all on the gel plate. So you cannot use those for techniques like this. In my experience, the only inks that dry really well on the gel plate are alcohol ink and stazon, and there are a couple other alcohol-based inks that dry eventually, but not as quick as the stazon. So that's why I use the stazon instead of any other brand for this specific technique. Acrylic ink is very different than alcohol ink. So normally alcohol inks cannot be used on normal paper. You need something that is non-porous, like Yupo paper or plastic or anything like that, to use alcohol inks. But that's the nice part of using alcohol inks on the gel plate, because you use that layer of acrylic paint to pull the print. You can print on any paper. It doesn't matter. You can print on tissue paper, on watercolor paper, on just normal copier paper, book paper, whatever you like. And what is also different about acrylic ink is that it has not this capacity that alcohol ink has, that you that it pushes away the ink that is already there when you add a new color of ink. Okay, stencils. One of my, I think this might be my favorite technique on with alcohol inks. So again, I'm going to apply a couple of colors on the gel plate. Just very random. And for this technique I don't have to dry the alcohol ink before I go to the next step, so that's nice. Again, I'm just going to move it around a little bit, not like brayering all over it, because I want to see all the different colors still. And I love how the colors blend and make these like puddles. Also, I really like my cleanup paper when I do gel printing with alcohol ink. You get the most beautiful cleanup paper. So I'm going to place the stencil on top of my alcohol ink while it's still wet. And I'm going to use my brayer to lightly push the stencil to touch the gel plate everywhere. And also kind of to remove a little bit of the alcohol ink that is in the open areas, because if there's still a lot of these color in the open areas, when I add new colors they will mix, and that might not always give a nice result. So now I'm going to add new colors, different colors in the open areas. And they will kind of stay in these open areas. In some areas they will also go underneath the stencil, but in general they will kind of stay in the open areas. And they kind of pile up at the edges. So you usually get a little bit thicker layer of ink around the edges of the pattern. I can add another one. Let's do a blue one. Pool. Let's do pool. Okay, this is kind of what I want. I can move it around a little bit still, because it's still wet. Now I have to decide at what point I want to remove the stencil. Because if the ink is still very wet and I remove the stencil, it will just blend. The wet ink underneath the stencil will just blend with the ink that's in the open areas, because they are both still wet and they react to each other. If I leave the stencil on for too long, until the ink is completely dry, then when I remove the stencil, I will also remove big parts of the color that's already underneath the stencil. So the yellow and the green that I put on there first, that will be stuck to the stencil, and I will just remove it when I lift up the stencil. So I need to kind of you have to find out how long it needs to dry to get exactly what you want. And I will show you, I have two samples here, what the difference is. So this one, for instance, I removed the stencil in a very early stage, and you can see that here the colors just blended, and I lost most of the pattern of the stencil. I love this print. I think it's totally cool. But if you want a more defined pattern, then you leave on the stencil just a little bit longer, and you get this. So I'm just going to lift up the stencil a little bit to see what happens, and I can see when I lift it up that the ink moves underneath the stencil. That means that it's still quite wet. And when if I lift it up now, I will probably end up with something like this, which is nice, but it depends on what you want, right? So I think I will leave it a little bit longer. Well, actually, this looks pretty good, so I'm just going to lift it up completely. There you go. So you can see that there's actually quite a good pattern. It will work still a little bit as long as the ink is wet. And now again, I need this to dry before I can pull the print with the acrylic paint. So I just have to put my stencil somewhere. Let me see, I'll put it there. And I'm going to put this aside like the other one and pull the print later. But I have one here that I did this afternoon, and I used a different stencil. I used, let me see, I've got it here somewhere. I used this stencil, which is also pretty cool with this technique, actually. So you can see that I left on the stencil quite long, and you have these areas here where there's no color left. That means that the color was lifted up by the stencil. So the longer, but there are also areas where it actually the colors did blend. So probably in some areas I just added more ink than in other areas, and where there was less ink it dried quicker than where there was more ink. So you can see it's very, very unpredictable, but I think that's kind of the charm of it. I like that. So acrylic paint again, and you will almost always see me use white acrylic paint to lift the print. That's not because you cannot use any other color. You can use any color you like, but a different color will change the color of your ink, because the inks are quite translucent. So I could actually, if I want to, I could use pink ink to pull the print, and you would definitely still see the pattern, but the yellow would not be as yellow as it will be when you lift it with white ink. That makes sense, right? So let's get some paper ready. Again, I'm going to put the acrylic paint all around my brayer before I touch the gel plate. And I'm going to make the layer a little bit thinner than I did before, because I just want to lift all the ink in one go. So there we go. And here we go. And isn't that beautiful? I love it. I love it, I love it. So somebody says, what about matte medium? You can definitely use matte medium, and then it will not change the color of your ink at all. But I kind of like the painterly look that you get when you use acrylic paint to pull the print. It's just a different feel when you use the acrylic paint or a matte medium to pull your print. But you can experiment with that. Basically, a matte medium is acrylic paint without pigments, so it works the same. and you can definitely do that. So let me see if my previous plate is dry. This one, the one I did with the stamping and then adding a little bits of yellow ink. Again, acrylic paint, very thin layer. If your layer of acrylic paint is too thick, your paper will only pick up the top layer of the paint and it will not be able to lift the ink that's underneath. That is basically the case with all products you want to pull from the plate. Any dry product you want to pull from the plate, you need a very, very thin layer of paint, because otherwise it just doesn't stick to the paper. And here we go. You can see here, actually, do as I say, not as I do. Use too much paint there. There's still some left, but you get the idea, right? And actually, I kind of like the distressed look of that. Okay, that is the one with the stamping. And probably by now, my other one is dry too. And it can be quite hard to determine whether or not the ink is dry, because it kind of stays a little bit shiny, and you have to be careful to touch it, because if you touch it while it's still a bit wet, then you will get fingerprints. But this is actually, I'm not getting any fingerprints, so I suppose this is dry. So let's pull a print. I see somebody saying, I saw a print this last week that someone had made by putting gilding foil directly on their plate. They said that it pulled up just like any other layer that you put down. Have you tried that before? I have not tried it, but I've seen it, and it makes total sense, because the gilding foil will actually stick to the alcohol ink, and it will just pull with the ink. So yeah, why not? I can totally imagine that that would work, and I really need to try that, because that sounds like fun. So how about this? Don't you like this? I love it. Just keep it up a little bit. Quite a lot of detail in there actually, and you can see that the blue ink actually really stayed in the open area and did not go underneath the stencil, which is pretty cool. So that's that technique, and then I have another one, and this is one that a lot of people actually liked on Instagram. I have never had so many likes on a post on Instagram as on this one, and that's the one with, I don't know if you've seen it, with the little glasses and the circles. So what I did, I've put different colors again of alcohol ink just randomly on the plate. Please show us the foil when you try. I definitely will. I don't have it here right now, but maybe I have time tomorrow to try, and then I will definitely post it on Instagram. So this is my first layer of ink. And you don't even, if you don't want to, you don't even have to completely cover the plate. It can be totally okay. It can look totally great if you have areas that are still open, that have no ink at all, or maybe you could even work in layers. I mean, if I put another color of ink in here, it will push away the ink that's already there, but as long as it's still wet, what's on the plate, it will also kind of blend. And if the ink on the plate is already dry when you put some drops of a different color in there, then it pushes it more away, like in a circle, like you can see that it's actually drops. So there is a difference in adding more colors to it when it's wet or when it's dry, but it's something you should experiment with and just see how the inks react, and it's just fun to play and see what happens. So this is my first layer, and I'm just going to put some glasses on top like this, and they will create circles in the final print. So actually they kind of, it's still a little bit slippery because the ink is still quite wet. It would have been better if I had waited a little bit longer for the inks to dry. But you never know, maybe I get the best print ever. That's the hardest part of working with alcohol inks, is that you have to be a little bit patient. And yeah, if you know me, that's not my strongest part, let's say that. So now that I've got my glasses on here, I'm going to pick a different color or a couple of different colors, and let me see, let's do something crazy. Let's do flamingo and purple twilight. This can either be totally cool or like a color disaster, we'll see. So to create circles, I have to carefully add some drops at the edge of the glass. So actually I will put it against the glass and then let it drip down to make sure that it's like all around, it goes all around the glass. So when it hits the bottom, maybe, I don't know if you can see it, but it starts to move around the glass. So I can just add a couple of drops, and let's do the same color here. And let's do the other color on this side and some on this side. And I can actually also, if I want to, do two colors on one glass, and they will kind of blend and not the same everywhere. So now this really needs to dry, because if I lift up the glasses now, then all the color will just blend and I will lose the circles. And this will take quite a while because the ink has piled up underneath the edge of the glasses, and it's kind of protected there from oxygen, and it will take a while before it's dry. But of course I also prepared this one, so this afternoon here it is. Now I will keep it a little bit closer to the video so you can see. So after I removed the first glasses, the first circles are the big ones, and when everything was dry I added smaller ones and little caps like this in the middle of the bigger glasses, and again added some ink and waited for it to dry. And I did that a couple of times until this was the result on my plate. And now I'm going to pull this print. So let's get some paper ready and some clean paper here. Okay, here we go. This is always such an exciting moment because you never know what's coming up. It always looks different when it's actually on the paper. And yeah, you also still have that possibility that you did not add the right amount of paint and you just end up with something that is, oh, look at this. How cool is this? Yeah. Totally love it. Love, love, love. So the other one still needs to dry a little bit more. So I'm just going to leave that and do another one. So what I just did with the glasses, you can actually also do, and let me find my examples. I'm making such a mess here. You won't believe it. It's crazy, crazy. So here's the one that I showed on Instagram. And I made this one using cookie cutter. A cookie cutter. And I have a big box filled with plastic cookie cutters, and I've never used them to bake cookies, but I love to use them in my artwork. And so this is what I prepared this afternoon. So there's one star that is ready, because this one takes even longer to dry, because there's a lot of ink that will pile up underneath the star that needs to dry. But I'm going to show you how I made that star. So first I made my first layer using pinks and oranges, and when it was dry I've put the star on top, and then at the outside I added a blue ink, like I just did with the little glasses, but then you can add a different color on the inside. So I've put a yellowish green, let me see, it's called a lime green, I think, citrus green on the inside. So the colors blend, and the inside has a little bit different color than the outside, which I think is pretty cool. So I only have one of these, So I need to work in stages, and I can only do one at a time, but that's okay because this can dry, and then I can create another one. And if I want to, I can put something here and I can put something there, and I can just build it up. But again, then you need to be pretty patient, and that's hard. But it's worth it. I mean, it does look amazing, doesn't it? And let's see. So I'm just carefully again adding ink on the outside and hoping that it's moving all around. I think that pretty much worked. And now I'm going to put a different color on the inside. Let's do the sunshine yellow, because it's such a happy color. So there's now quite a lot of ink underneath the star, and to make sure that my star is not going to float around, I'm going to put something on top while it's drying. And I had, I don't know, let's put my, so I have, this is my big bottle of alcohol, which is cleaning alcohol, and that's what you use to clean your tools and your stencils and your brayer. Usually when I work with acrylic paint, I don't clean my brayer a lot. It just builds up. I roll off the paint, and then it just builds up, and when it's like a really thick layer, I will clean my brayer. But when you work with alcohol ink and you use the brayer over and over and over again, and the same with the stencils, the alcohol on your tools will reactivate when you add new alcohol ink. So at some point it will just all be yucky, like mud, because all the colors have built up and they all blend together in one yucky color. So you need to clean, and you can only clean your tools with alcohol, because you will not be able to clean it off with soap. So I've been waiting a little bit, but it's still not long enough for it to be dry. But I have my glasses here. Let's see how that goes. I'm just carefully going to lift them up, and it looks like they are dry enough. And it's okay if it kind of moves a little still when you lift up the glasses, but it should not be too much. But I have some pretty cool circles here. So let's add this here and this there, and one of these in here, and one of these in here. And now we're just going to add different colors than we did before. And here also there is already some color on the little glasses, so it will also reactivate. So I'm adding now the yellow, but some of the pink that's still on the glasses will also come down with the yellow and add some color to the next circle, which is nice. The more color the better. So this is going to be put aside again. And while we're waiting for these to dry, I have yet another technique. And for that, I'm going to I need a box because it could be messy. So I'm going to show you how to create something like this. And I actually did this with a straw last week, and then some people pointed out that that's maybe not the best idea because you might accidentally inhale a little bit of the alcohol ink, and that's not very healthy. So it's not a really good idea to use a straw. And apparently there is a tool to move the alcohol ink around, but of course I couldn't get that at such short notice. So what I bought is a balloon pump to pump balloons, right? And it actually works. So I can show you tonight how to make these. And because it can be messy, I'm going to do it in a box. Let's move this out of the way. There we go. And I'm going to put my gel plate in the box. Maybe it's better if I put it in there on my sheet of paper, because then it's easier to take it out when I'm done. And now I'm just going to again randomly add colors. Barbara says I have a blower from Tim Holtz. Yeah, exactly. That's what I meant. That's the one that I couldn't get so quickly, so that's why I'm using my balloon pump. And it might not be perfect, but it will work. So I'm just going to blow. Yeah, that's a good one. It's a little bit different than using a straw. I mean, with the straw I had more control of where exactly I wanted the ink to go, but probably with the balloon pump it will also be easier because it's a little bit smaller. But this is really just to show you the idea, and you can do it any way you like. It is kind of messy. It was a good idea to use a box, because I did that too with the straw and then nothing really happened. But this blows a little bit more than my little straw. A hairdryer, says Maria. A hairdryer also makes awesome effects. I bet it does, but you're not supposed to use any heat on the gel plate, so I would not recommend that. But of course you can use that maybe also without heat. I'm not sure. I never use one. Okay, well, you get the idea. So let's just leave this to dry. It definitely does not give as much texture as the straw did, as you can see. But it will probably look pretty cool anyway when we pull the print. So let's leave this to dry. And how much time did we, how long have we been doing this? Already almost an hour. Unbelievable. I can't believe it. Time flies when you're having fun. So let me see, where's my, that's my little star. So I removed the star, and as you can see, it was still quite wet. So it's moving more than I really wanted it to move, and I'm losing the image here because the color is just blending. Instead of having these like darker lines around the edges where the ink piled up, it's now just floating around and you're just losing the shape. But that's okay. I mean, I already showed you what it looks like if you are patient enough to wait until the ink is more dry than this one. And this is still too wet to pull the print, so that's not what I'm going to do right now. But what I am going to do right now is to show you how I make the little dots, and then kind of at the end of today's live. So you can use one of these, and I really don't have any idea what this is called in English, but you all know what it is, right? And you probably all have it in your home. So what you can do is just add ink to it, enough to have it like quite wet, and you can just add dots to your background. And you can of course use different colors. And as you can see, every time I put it down, the blue ink is pushing away the pink and the orange, and you get this texture, and that's the same texture. This is what it looks like when you pull the print, which is also kind of fun. Q-tips, that's how they called. Yes, I remember now. So let's just check this one to see. No, this is still too wet. I will not be able to pull that one today, but you've already seen it because that was this one. So we did the cookie cutters, we did the glasses and the lids, we did the blowing, we did the stamping and lifting and adding little splatters, and we did the stencils. Yeah, I think that's what we did today. So I'm going to see, I think I'm going to put the screen back to let me see if I can get myself back into the, yes, here I am. So let me see if there are any questions that I can answer right now. Please pull your stars so we can see. Okay. Okay, let's pull it before we leave. I think we're just going to try. There's my paper and my paint. One last print before we go. There we go. There they are. I still kind of like that it's not perfect. Not everything has to be perfect, does it? Okay, first time watching. You're welcome, Diane. Good to have you here. Thank you all for being here. This was fun. It's amazing how fast that went. I don't see if you poke a couple of holes in with a needle. I get it, with the balloon pump. That would actually be, might work. I could try that. Okay, I don't think that there are any like real questions at the moment. No. Okay. Well, I guess this was it for today. Thank you so much all for being here and watching this video, and I hope to see you again next time. Bye.